that stool, I'll miss some eyeballs. Man, thank you. There's no such thing as an over-encouraged pastor, but I feel very over-encouraged right now for sure. I was talking to my wife on the way over here, and she goes, now tell me how you know the Georges again. And I was like, I don't know how I exactly know the Georges. Gatherine is the connection point, and I felt like as soon as I knew the Georges, it was just friendship immediate. So I told her, I love them because they first loved me. Like they started encouraging so much and started, this is gonna be a shock to y'all. Fran would send emails that were just filled with scripture and encouragement. I was like, man, what an encouraging lady. And so, honored to be here. I've been to Providence, worshiped there a couple of times now. Came up there for kind of brought our worship pastor and just kind of hung out in Raleigh and went to a lot of different churches, and probably 5 or 6 churches, probably would know all of them. But landed in Providence, but because of our connection with Daniel Savage, we went to a staff meeting at Providence one day. Are you nodding your head because you were there? Okay. You may remember the story I'm about to say that, because we were in a staff meeting and told Daniel, Pastor Jared, we'll just sit at the very back and we'll just kind of be flies on the wall. And we were listening, and Pastor Brian, right, said, hey, you're a pastor. Is it John? Yes. Tell me what you thought about church yesterday. And I was like, of course it was the best sermon I've ever heard. Phenomenal. But he said, no, be critical. Like, what's something that we can do differently? And my palms began to sweat. I don't get really anxious, but I was like, that's putting someone on the spot, And so I told him that your columns were hard to see around sometimes, right? And so where we were seated, I couldn't see some of the things. And so I remember that because I felt like there was a heat lamp on me immediately. I was trying to be the hidden fly on the wall, the wallflower. And he pointed me out and said, what did you think about it yesterday? So, and then, y'all all know Daniel Savage? Yeah, okay. I always says camp pastor when he was a 3rd grader, so that's how far back we go. And it was his youth minister when he was in middle school, his youth minister when he was in high school, did the wedding for he and Amy, hired him at First Baptist Houston, and then when I went to Irving, which is Dallas-Fort Worth, hired him as our youth pastor up there. So I've known him, the 33 years, somewhere along that time frame. I'm not going to tell you the funniest story I have on him. Actually, I have several really funny stories. Most of them probably should not be repeated, but this one I will repeat. And I'm not going to tell you all of it because it could be a long story. But he and I were roommates in the Ukraine, so that's kind of interesting in the world today. And we stayed with a young deacon at the church who was engaged. And so he told us, he said, in the morning, my fiance's gonna come over and cook us breakfast every morning before y'all head off to your mission trip. And so I said, that's great. Well, the kitchen is a very small little flat, little apartment there in Ukraine. We were in Lviv, Ukraine. And the bathtub was in the kitchen. And so you know where the story's going, all right? And so early in the morning, like he, started, you have to pour hot water from the stove. That's why it was the bathtub was there, we'll pour hot water in there. And so he was gonna jump in the bath, and I was this day in bedroom working on some things. And the door opened to the apartment, and I just assumed it was the deacon, the guy. And all of a sudden I hear Daniel go, John? John. And she was in the kitchen cooking 4 feet from him in the bathtub. So he was grabbing the soap, trying to cloud up the water as fast as he could. And I walked in, and there's 17, 18-year-old Daniel in the bathtub looking at me, like staring at this woman who was this close. She didn't care. She was not intrigued by a teenager in the bathtub. She was just cooking carrots, all that kind of stuff. So if you'll just, next time you see him, just say, hey, we all heard the details of the Ukrainian bathtub story. He will send me a text message immediately of anger back. And that's one of many, but that's actually one of the most decent stories I can tell about. So I'm really grateful to be here and just thank the world of Fran and Craig and certainly David and Catherine. And I think when I grow up one day, I want to grow up to be like Daniel Savage. That's just kind of one of my standards right there. And I will say this, I have a 25-year-old son, and Daniel would be one of the guys I'd love for my son Caleb just to grow up to be like. He loves the Lord, loves his family, loves the gospel, articulates the gospel. He's a churchman. He's an amazing friend to his friends, so loyal. And a small world, my wife, who I wanted to bring here to Raleigh this time through, is actually speaking in Houston for Daniel Savage's mom. And so she's the women's minister at her church. So she asked my wife to go down to Houston to speak at a retreat there. So all roads lead to Daniel Savage. We're all 7 degrees separated from him somehow, for sure. So Highland's been a really interesting story. I've been there 12 years now. Got there, was running about 1,400 people. We were very program heavy. Did a lot of programmatic type of things, a lot of events, a lot of conference types of things. And we were there for 2 years, and we had 1,400 people 2 years into it. Like, there was no growth at all. There was no, we weren't slipping back at all. People weren't leaving, but there was nothing really happening, nothing stirring. So about year 3, we made a commitment to stop doing so much programming and to pray a whole lot more. In fact, one of the things, just reminding David this earlier, one of the things one of our elders says, what if we prayed more than we planned for events? What if we prayed more than we planned? And that really kind of started sticking to us and started cultivating really a church of prayer. Isn't it interesting that Jesus didn't say, my house will be called a house of preaching, or my house will be called a house of programming, or my house will be called a house of worship and singing, but a house of prayer. That's a declaration, maybe a delineation that Jesus gives us. And so we really began some movements of prayer and some prayer gatherings and teaching on prayer. And interesting what the Lord did with that. If you do hear me preach, I know Fran has said such kind things, you will realize that Highland's not growing because of the preaching. I am very average of a speaker. Our worship is not phenomenal, and one of my best friends is the worship pastor there. But the Lord really started instructing us to grow in prayer, to develop a culture of prayer. And what's interesting, the church started growing, but it didn't start growing with senior adults, which in my mind I thought, if we pray a lot, 7-year-olds are going to show up. Like 17, 20, 24-year-olds, 30, they don't want to come in like to prayer meetings all the time. But we started seeing a growth in the church because of the culture of prayer, as in elders praying and anointing people with oil who were sick on Sunday morning, which may sound charismatic, it's very biblical. Prayer times where our men would gather every Sunday morning and pray, women would gather every Sunday morning and pray, church would gather every Sunday afternoon and pray, and then we have these pray and prayers moments. And that's when all of a sudden we started pulling away from the program, we started pushing into the prayer. We started seeing the Lord do some things, specifically with kind of that 18 to 30-year-old group. I do want to say those numbers again because they're fascinating to me. And again, if I was a great preacher, it would sound like I was boasting in what the Lord was doing through the preaching. And since I'm not a good preacher, I can tell you that it's the Lord's work, which is really satisfying when God does something that you can't do. When that happens, the preacher or the programmers or the staff can't get any credit for it. Only the Lord Jesus can receive the credit, the glory, the honor for it. Started seeing that growth. So it was a matter of a year after that, we had to go from 2 worship gatherings to 3 worship gatherings. And then 6 years later, we had to go from 3 worship gatherings to 4 worship gatherings. Our men's prayer, I want you to know this is a pretty cool story. Our men's prayer on Sunday morning, when we first started, we had about 7 or 8 guys that would get there at 8 o'clock. And we're up to about 125 men that come to men's prayer on Sunday morning. But the cool thing is 100 of them are under the age of 22. And what's fascinating to me is watching these college guys and young adult men walk in, and we get in triads. So there's 3 chairs of 3 all over this room. And some of the older men get there a little bit early because older men do that. You notice the older men get to places early, and college students always run in right on time or a minute late. I don't know if you picked up on that either. The college students are usually good at that. Although it was the college guys that were all here first today. It was shocking. It was amazing. But it was fascinating because when college guys walk in, they don't stay in their huddle of 3 to pray. They want to go pray with the 50-year-olds, the 60-year-olds, the 70-year-olds. And when I asked them about this, I may get teary-eyed saying it, their dads never taught them how to pray. So they want to learn how to pray from these 6-year-old men. There's some, we have, Ron's probably 82, 83 years old. And they beeline toward these really unhip, uncool, men, just because they want to be with them to hear how they pray. And so about 60% of Highland is under the age of 30. Our average new member this last 5 years has been 26 years old, and we've had 550 new members of the church in the last 6 months. And again, that would sound unbelievably arrogant for me to say if I was here to say, I've got to be like me, I've got to follow my footsteps. The humbling thing, the reality of it is, it has been an accentuation of prayer. And what I want to share with you tonight, I think this passage probably wraps up some of the things that we have seen. And what's going to be interesting tonight, I'm going to be talking about a generation that mainly is in this room, and encouraging a generation that's mainly in this part of the house on how to connect with. And so what's going to be fascinating at the end of this quick little talk is going to be a mini sermon, more of a devotional, is I can look over here and find out if I said it correctly or not, or look over here, Aaron, to you as well, see if I said it correctly or not. And so, because I think you're bringing some of the age curve down over on this side. Paul, on his second missionary journey, he took Silas with him, and they were in Troas. You remember the Macedonian call. He thought he was going one way, and a messenger of the Lord came and said, no, I want you to cross over the Aegean. I want you to go from Troas. So he goes over to Neapolis, and he lands there, and he makes his way to some very familiar cities. First of all, Philippi, and he's there for a while, and he's ministering with Silas. And the story. Like pretty much every place he goes, they get kicked out, or they get imprisoned, and then they get chased out, or then they're begged by the believers there, please leave. What's interesting in Berea, so I'll skip ahead a little bit. When in Berea, they asked Timothy and Silas to stay, but they asked Paul to leave. And so the common denominator of the troublemaker is Paul. Like wherever he is, like there's going to be some troubles. It was not Silas, it was not Timothy. And so they went to Philippi. A lot of the stories there, end up in prison. But they go from Philippi then to Thessalonica, and it is there that Paul and Silas and Timothy develop a deep love for the believers there. He pronounced, Christ is king, Jesus is king. It's not Caesar, and by seemingly multitudes, the Greeks especially, because remember. Thessalonica is up in Macedonia, so the northern part of Greece. We're just turning to the Lord. And so when Paul writes the letter of 1 Thessalonians, which probably is his first letter that he wrote, at least the first letter that we have that he wrote, it was written with an endearment toward the people of Thessalonica. And so let me just read a couple of passages. This is 1 Thessalonians 2. If you have your Bible, that's great. If you have your smartphone, that's great. Or you can just hear it as I say the word aloud, read the word aloud. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 5 and 8. And again, Paul is writing to them. Timothy has stayed, so he's heard a report, remember, from Timothy on their faith is just enlarging. Their faith is growing. It's one of those places where Paul doesn't necessarily have to write them with great admonishment like he does so many of his letters, but he is speaking in some glowing terms. 1 Thessalonians 2:5, for we never came with words of flattery, as you know, not with a pretext for greed, God is our witness, nor did we seek glory from people, whether from you or from others, though we could have made demands as apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. So, being affectionately desirous of you, we are ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also ourselves, because you have become very dear to us. I just grabbed 6 words out of that passage that I think, from my experience, so I'm almost 56, from my experience, ministering to and spending a lot of my time with college students and young adults, I think I've found these 6 words to be effective, fruit-bearing, and something that Gen Z, and man, we're getting close to Gen Alpha moving into that college group. This is bizarre, college group as well. Some things that they're looking for. So again, I've got an incredible responsibility tonight at the end to either get thumbs up or thumbs down from Gen Z. And I'm great. If it's thumbs down, I want to change this talk, for a future talk sometime. But the first thing is in verse 5. For we did not come with words of flattery, and we did not come with a pretext for greed. And I just wrote down the word authenticity. That Gen Z is looking for authentic leaders who are authentic in their flaws and are willing to be transparent of, man, here's some things I'm struggling with, and here's some things that aren't going so well in my life right now. I think that my generation, we learned from the generation above me to not share your problems and to not be transparent when there's a struggle. And in doing so, the generation above me taught my generation, don't talk about your problems. And the best you can, make sure that you look like you don't have any problems, because that's what good Christians do. They live a life with no problems at all. And I think something I've seen in Gen Z is a desire to be around authentic investors, authentic leaders, authentic examples that will be willing to say, here's some things I have found that work really well in my walk with Jesus, my marriage, have worked really well with serving in the church, but also here's some things that I've struggled with, and here's some things even that, and maybe if you wrestled with doubt, non-Gen Z, if you wrestled with doubt before, or wrestled with spiritual disciplines of the faith, I have seen Gen Z respond really well when you say, man, here's some good things happening in my life, but can I also share with you some of the struggles? All of a sudden what that does, it gives permission to Gen Z to go, oh man, I'm glad you've struggled with some of those things. Here's some of my struggles. And this is what Paul says. We didn't have some pretext of wanting to be something we were not. And I think I wrote down, Gen Z can smell fake from a mile away. And let me also add, they can smell religiosity from a mile away as well. When there's no life happening in here, but we're putting a facade up. Millennials can fool millennials all day long, and boomers can fool boomers even twice as long as that. But Gen Z has, and I think it's a gift actually from the Lord. They're able to see right through inauthenticity. And they certainly have seen it in people trying to flatter them, or people trying to win them over, even though there's an inauthenticity about them. This next statement may sound kind of harsh, but I'll say it. I think Gen Z's expectation is that most people are fake. And so when you enter into a relationship with a mentoring relationship, their assumption, whether they say it out loud or not, is that so much they have seen on social media and so much that has been an influence in their lives is such a facade and so fake and such again a pretense that when they're able to see that, man, that person is authentic, there's an authentic faith about them. Isn't that funny that becomes one of the most attractional things to Gen Z? It's not how hip you are, how cool you are, how young, how old you are, how successful you've been in life and business. They just want to see the authenticity of a disciple of Christ, which is good because, and this is good for me. I'm a horrible, inauthentic person. I don't do plastic very well at all. And so I think that's probably leveraged to my advantage in ministry is even sitting down with, had coffee. God, this is a great story. He's from Pakistan. His name is Miraj, and the Lord in a dream revealed himself last year, and he was at Columbia University, and he gave his life to Christ and transferred to Baylor because he heard it was a great Christian school. Ends up at Highland, and so last week he just said, I hope this is okay if I say this. Durham, you're 55. Do you still struggle with lust? And I was like, man, what generation? Of course, only a brand new believer would ask the Baptist pastor. If you grew up in church, I'm not supposed to ask anybody that, much less the pastor of the church. It was so refreshing to me, and to lay out some of my struggle with lust as a college student, as a young adult, and to give him some of the keys that I feel like the Lord's given me to move in victory in that was so refreshing to me. And I thought, I would have never asked my pastor that. I would never ask my youth minister. I'm not sure I would ask my best friend that question, much less a brand new believer from Pakistan asking his Baptist preacher, lead pastor, what about you? What about your struggle with lust? Like, how have you found victory in that? Here's the next thing, is verse 6. Nor did we seek glory from people, whether from you or for others, though we could have. We could have made demands as apostles. That's wrote down the word selflessness. Selflessness has a lot of currency in Gen Z. And again, it's because of, without trying to trash your generation, I promise you my generation has much more things that we could trash about. They have been taught to be self-centered, right? So Gen Z has been taught to, social media, which really, when you think about it, social media is nothing more than self-importance and self-promotion, right? It's just fancy. And so, so much of Gen Z has been taught that everything in life is about you. Now, if you're not Gen Z, I get any amens on this, but that's what frustrates us about this generation sometimes. We feel like they're so self-centered or self-absorbed, if you will. And so when a non-Gen Zer expresses some sentiments of selflessness, as in, Ethan, I want to hear your story more than I just get to blabber about my story. And I think sometimes my generation, we're kind of guilty of wanting to tell our stories first so that we kind of sound important. Or if you will, can we be really, transparent with one another, vulnerable? Sometimes we like to tell our stories so that you'll want to be like us, or you'll want to think, oh man, they got their act together. I want to be around this person. And being selfless, non-Gen Zers, again, is amazing currency for Gen Z when the conversations become about your life and not just about our lives. And Paul said here, we could have made this all about us. We were apostles. Like we kind of had some cool things going for us. Paul could have said, Jesus discipled me. Like I have a lot of great things I can tell you, but instead, I'm not here for my own greed. So I just wrote down the word selflessness, the second great word to consider when it comes to ministry to college students and to peers. So maybe this is where I can communicate really well with the college students who are here. All these things I hope, are sounding a little bit true about you. They're also very true about your generation. So as believers in Christ, and kind of my assumption, hope it's a good assumption, there are some very steady believers, leaders. You've been vetted. Non-Gen Zers have seen in you some giftedness, some leadership. So now you're leading, your college life groups, your college small groups. And so the good news for you is these same 6 words I'm about to use that I'm kind of thinking about the non-Gen Zers are the exact same 6 words you can use in ministry to your own peer group. Next word was also in verse 6. Let me just read verse 6 again. We didn't seek glory from people, whether from you or from others. I'm assuming he means there in the church or maybe the people at Thessalonica. Though we could have made demands as apostles of Christ. And so the third word I used, and to me, If you're getting sleepy, this is the most important word, so you can fall asleep on the next one, but stay awake for this one. It's the word humility. I think humility is the secret weapon to build a bridge to college students and young adults. And again, I think because I think about, man, I'll try not to use names because I think it'd be gossipy if I did, but just think about in your own mind, the last 36 months, the well-known and even beloved pastors who have fallen, sexual temptation, glory temptation, probably a heightened over sense of achievement of what they have done. I mean, again, I think that impacts Gen Z so much because what all those stories have in common, if I may, is arrogance. Like this sense of entitlement. You remember how we felt when the whole Clinton-Lewinsky thing came out? Like, there's just that, how the president, how entitled do you feel to take a young intern into your office and sexually manipulate that entire situation? I remember that. It still makes my stomach churn thinking about it. But I have to kind of feel that same sense toward some very bright pastors who really have that exact same sense of entitlement. And I think that potentially can turn off Gen Z more than any other generation that's established right now. I think there's 5 generations, which is interesting. There's never been 5 generations in the church. From Acts 2 until about 1985 is when the lifespan was expanded enough in the U.S. There's now 5 generations. That's why church is hard, staff. That's why church is hard. It'd be really easy if it was just Gen Z. But man, you got boomers in there also. They have completely different, and then millennials we're the weirdest of them all. And then Gen Alpha, honestly, is going to be, I think Gen Alpha is going to be most like the greatest generation, as in the World War II vets. They're dying off now because Gen A, Generation Alpha, is so civic. Like they want to change the world. They want to be involved. They want their hands in on things. So it's going to be interesting. I may be way off on that, but I may be dead by the time you find out. So we'll see how that turns out. The humility, and here's what little phrase I wrote down. Humility sets us apart from the world. When you think about, everything from the commercialization of our culture, again, to the aforementioned social media, everything is the antithesis of humility. It's look at me, look how important I am, look what I can do, look at my individualism. I mean, that's just kind of that's the nature of our culture. And so when a college student comes into your college small group with a sense of humility, or when a non-Gen Zer comes into the life of an 18, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, and you come in humbly, there's going to be this immediate sense of, wow, that's different. Here's what I want to say. There's an aroma to humility that is so distinct. Just as distinct as the aroma to arrogance is disgusting, right? And so you can smell, I hope I'm using this word correctly, you can smell humility just as quick as you can smell arrogance. And Gen Z loves the smell of humility. An interesting thing, they don't smell it that often. I'll stick with my smell analogy here. They don't smell it that often. But they've gotten so accustomed to the smell of arrogance, self-importance, and sadly, they've picked up on that scent at times in church, where we're not carrying around the aroma of Christ with us, which is an aroma of lowly, gentle, kind, humble. You think about the humility of Christ to walk away from the worship of heaven and to put on skin and to be born, and even the location, a filthy place of animals. So that smell of humility is unbelievably attractional because it's in stark contrast to the smell of arrogance that Gen Z is just accustomed to us smelling like, if you will, so often. All right, I'll move on past the smell analogy. Verse 7, that we were gentle among you. This is weird language, by the way. this is really weird language, that 3 men would write this, basically, right? Paul, Silas, Timothy are writing the church. But we were gentle among you. Us 3 men, we were like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. I remember a seminary professor saying, I mean, I know the Holy Spirit inspired this, but this was just weird for Paul, who was kind of a little brash, right? Kind of a man's man. Because what he's saying here is we were like a breastfeeding mother to the church. I mean, really, maybe one other time does Paul get that tender, and that's when he wrote the church at Philippi. When you read the first chapter of Philippians, it almost sounds like a love letter I wrote to my girlfriend in high school. Like, I desire to be with you. I long for you with this great affection. It's like Shakespearean. Well, right here, he says, like, we were like breastfeeding mothers among the church. And I just wrote down the word nurturing. I think that's something that Gen Z, and again, I know this is probably not true of a lot of your moms and dads. I would imagine a lot of you have phenomenal parents, but your generation feels very detached from their parents. And some of that's generational, as in, some generational gaps, communication gaps. But think how different, because again, I've got a 28-year-old daughter and a 25-year-old son. And I have to work to understand them. I mean, one, just their text messages. I'm still having like, what? I don't know what these 4 letters mean. Like, I'm always having to ask my young staff, like, what is my son saying right here? What does this mean? But it's the biggest communication gap because this generation did not grow up with phones in our hand. And it's not like I'm just going to trash you. I'm really not. We actually grew up looking at each other and talking. And this generation is down so often looking at things, and probably some of them are very noble, communication, email, text, friendships, relationships, information, class schedule, what's going on. We used to do that by actually picking up this is going to blow your mind. We had a phone on our wall, right? We had to pick up, and every time it rang, it was a crapshoot. Like, I have no idea who's on the other end of this call. There was no caller ID. There was no contact information. It was terrifying. Who might actually be there? But there's a communication gap. It's the largest. It was Wilford. Oh God, what's his first name? No, Wilford was the astronaut. Williams. That said the biggest communication gap in the history of America is the communication gap between people who are in their 40s and 50s and those who are in their 20s, 30s. And it's all because of the phone. Isn't that crazy how just a little device like this has changed the communication processes and communication protocol? And so in my generation, I can email somebody and I get an email back. I email a college student at Baylor, and they have no idea even how to find their email. So I have to text them information. But because that's true, often about Gen Z and their parents, they have felt maybe some disconnect, even when it comes to some really important emotional nurturing. And so for non-Gen Z to step in, and when I say nurturing, I'm saying very words of encouragement, words of life. I see this in you. Aaron, here's something I see in you. I see the presence of the Lord in this way in your life. Like nurturing words. Here's the best way to think about it. What do you wish your dad would have said to you? And whenever you wish your dad would have said to you, make sure you're saying that to this generation. I'm proud of you. Well done. I love you because of who you are, not because of what you do. So whatever you missed out, whatever you wish your mom and dad would have said to you, more than likely, a lot of this generation never heard that from their mom and dad. And so for spiritual moms and dads to step in and to say some of those things that are missing, some of those gaps of communication, those gaps of words. So that's a good way to remember that. It's like a parent. And again, I'll go back to that men's prayer thing happening on Sunday mornings at Highland. Watching a 19-year-old fraternity guy come in on a Sunday morning. First of all, they come at 8 o'clock in the morning, which means they left campus at 7:45, which means they got up at 7:40, maybe whatever. They left. So we have a 11:20 gathering at Highland. We have a 4 p.m. And I always tell those guys, I would have barely made the 11:20 when I was a Baylor student. Barely, maybe. would have been there 11:20. But to watch a fraternity guy walk in at 8 o'clock, probably has 4 hours of sleep on a Saturday night, and beeline toward one of our Vietnam veterans. This is Mr. Bradford, and sit next to him. And Bradford, he's as weird as they come. Like, he is an odd duck. Like, he wears his Vietnam insignia baseball cap to church every Sunday. I won't get political, but wore a red hat for a while on Sunday mornings with me. So I was like, oh, Ron, please don't wear that to church. And these fraternity guy still has red eyes. Beelines to him because he loves how Ron prays. Because when Ron prays, he uses scripture from Revelation almost every time. Worthy are you, Lord, to receive all. And so these college guys are like, I want to be next to that. Well, I'll tell you again. Let me just say it one more time. The reason they want to be next to that, because they didn't hear their dad pray. Or their dad never said, hey, how can I pray for? What can we pray for? And so that nurturing ability, and again, if you are Gen Z, your generation can also receive nurturing from you. This doesn't have to be an older person to a younger person. All right, I'll keep going. So I do want to leave a little time for Q&A at the end. Verse 8, this is probably a scripture that y'all have known. It's a great one to hide in your heart if God has called you to lead out in the church. So, being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not just the gospel of God, but also ourselves. Some of your translations say also our very lives, because you become so dear to us. And so I just wrote down the word affectionate. So you have authenticity, selflessness, humility, nurturing, and affectionate. And being a good Baptist preacher, I have an alliteration of 3 words here beginning with the same letter. I put invite, include, and invest. How important those words are. Our affection is an inviting love. Hey man, I'd love for you to, I want to be a part of your life. You can be a part of my life. You want to come, one of the I think the greatest ministries. So here's what I hope to be known as, Craig, when I hope to die in obscurity. I hope people remember that they came and had barbecue at my house more than they remembered some great sermon that was preached once. And so, Jennifer, I have a goal to have 500 people in our house every year. Now, I will tell you that it's well helped because Super Bowl party for young adults, we have about 120. So that checks off a big list right there at the house. And we don't have a big house. We have to put, people are flowing out on the deck outside. And so we try to get new members, young families, and then college students, because when we do it this past Sunday night. After a show, we always give the college students an extra plate of Rudy's barbecue. We always do Rudy's barbecue every single time. So that I think that invitation to have people step into your house. So non-Gen Zers, it's amazing. You're beneficiaries of it at this very moment, right? The Georges have said, hey, come into our house. Like, we'll have food, and I'm sure you're going to scuff up the floor and bring dirt in, but we want you to be here. Gen Z, I've learned, I'm assuming it's the same in Texas as it is in North Carolina. Gen Z loves to be in the house of stable people, where they can walk in and go, I can be myself. There's no yelling. I'm loved here. It feels safe. It feels warm. It feels hospitable. And even if you grew up in if you grew up in that household, there's still something familiar if you grew up in that household when you come into a house. But if you grew up in a dysfunctional house, or you grew up in a house where mom and dad were yelling at each other all the time, or dad left, or there was hurt, or there was even some traumatic things, there is something so sweet about walking to a house where the Spirit of the Lord is and where God's people are. And so I would encourage non-Gen Zers, your house doesn't have to be awesome, but if it's open, to invite that younger generation in, because they want to see how do husbands and wives, how they're supposed to treat each other. What does hospitality look like? So invite, include, invest. I'll skip the rest of what I was going to say because I've been talking a lot. Verse 8, last word. So, being affectionately desirous of you, we are ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also ourselves, because you become very dear to us. If there's some of y'all that want to be pastors, teachers, ministers, church, paid church people. There's probably a lot of unpaid church people in here, but paid church people. I got this upside down at seminary that preaching the gospel of God was the sole thing. I don't think anybody told me that. I picked up on that, or I learned that incorrectly. And I love this passage because Paul's like, well, yeah, of course we preached the gospel of God, but we also shared our lives with you. And so I'm looking back, because my dad was my pastor. He's 83. He still preaches every Sunday. He preaches every Sunday, a little town called Crawford, Texas, right outside Waco. Then he comes and he and my mom come to hear me preach at 4 o'clock. So we do it 4 o'clock at Highland. And it's the coolest thing to look out. So my sweet wife comes back to the 4 o'clock, and she heard me preach at 8:40. Comes back to hear it again. It sits with my mom and dad. And one of the things that I think I've learned about looking back, I can't remember one sermon my dad preached. Isn't that horrible? Like he was my pastor from age birth, but from I remember 4 or 5 years old, and I even went to my dad's church when I was a college student. He was pastor in Waco as well, and I can't remember any sermon he preached, which is kind of sad. I'm sure I have some notes somewhere, but I could tell you at his funeral, hopefully a long time from now, but maybe this year, maybe next year, all the things that he meant to me, right? Like the feelings that I had, the way he invested, the way he was consistent. I can't remember if I was sharing with Aaron or with Ethan that even with you. I loved the gospel and I loved the local church because my dad was the exact same man in the pulpit as he was around the kitchen table. And I've got a lot of preacher kid friends who are deconstructing and away from the faith, maybe even apostates, because they saw such inconsistency in a preacher. Maybe it was their dad, maybe it wasn't their dad. So here's what I wrote down. I'm actually going to steal this from Howard Hendricks, a brilliant man. He said, "You impress people from afar, but you impact them up close." And so I'm just going to use the word impact there. You could be the best preacher in America, and you're probably some of the best small group leaders that the world has ever seen before. You're probably some of the best investors in Gen Z ever. But it's funny, like, they're not going to remember all these great lessons and teachings and sermons. You may be very impressive from afar, but you impact people when you're up close to it. And this is what Paul is saying. I'm sure he was a great preacher, probably fiery, wish I could run out of town or in prison, but it was his impact on people. Authenticity, selflessness, humility, nurturing, affectionate, and impacting, or impactful maybe is a better word there. It would be a great little slogan to put in your heart. I don't want to impress anybody this week, but I'd love to impact everybody this week for the gospel of Christ. All right, I probably talk so much more than I'm supposed to. So let me take a few minutes, maybe 3 questions, and I'll see if I can come up with 3 answers.
No, I think we're going to have more than 3 questions.
Do we? Okay. 3.5, 4 questions? Might have. About anything. It doesn't have to be about this. I mean,
Question.
Yeah.
Because I always, I've heard you for years now. How do you fight in what we do, all of us working with college students, even if you are a college student, and then all of us oldsters, discouragement. How do you fight when discouragement comes along?
Yeah. I was quoting Dane Ortland when I said, there's no such thing as an over-encouraged pastor, but it's certainly true about there's no such thing as an over-encouraged churchman or leader. I will say I think everybody wants to be a leader until they realize how much it costs. And then they're like, oh, following's great. I'll just be I mean, and you know this already, and especially you Gen Zers, as you continue to invest, to lead, to lead and to serve. And leadership is taxing. It costs you free time. Sometimes it costs you money. I mean, quite literally money, like finances, currency, bills. It costs you some things you would like to do, for yourself. Some of the big costs are, again, you're no longer the center of sometimes attention, especially if you're going to be selfless in that leadership. I mean, we're all hardwired. We got this from Adam and Eve, so this is this is DNA from them, to want everything to be about us. So if everything becomes about you, here's the long answer to your short question. If everything becomes about you, you'll be discouraged next week. If everything becomes about the continuity of the gospel and the eternal nature of the capital C church, and there is an eternal nature of the church, I love this. I mean, that's all heaven is a continuation of the capital C church. If you realize, I mean, this is all about the name of Christ and not my name. This is about the continuation of the eternal church. And I'm just a little, I mean, think how quick life is. So I'm 56, I'm 55. I'm 55, I'm almost 50, I'll be 56 in June. I'm at that age, I don't know how old I am, so I'll be 56. I mean, this was fascinating. I'm closer to death than I am my birth. It was weird when I got to that age going, oh man, I'm closer to grave than I am, cradle. But I think that once you kind of get to that place where you realize, man, my life is a blip. I am one of 8 billion people, and if this is about my story, what a sad existence this is going to be. But if I can attach my small little story to the brilliant story of Jesus and his kingdom, then it's like, man, my life burns for something, and it's going to burn out for something on that last day when we breathe my last. So, Fran, I know that may sound very esoteric. I don't know, but I try to fight discouragement by realizing when I do feel discouraged, it probably means I've been putting a lot of the focus on me that week instead of the eternal nature of the kingdom and of the church. But it's also good. This is an easy answer. It feels teed up. Always making sure you have some people around you who are encouragers. And I think one of the hardest things for me is to learn to step away from discouragers, and how refreshing it is to be around encouragers. And the etymology of that word, right, it makes so much sense. Like, it's just people that put courage into you. That's all that encouragement is you're hanging around people that love to challenge you to be courageous in your faith. So discouragement is lessened when we're lessened, when we become smaller and Jesus becomes bigger.
Anybody else?
That's a good question.
I got one.
Yes, ma'am.
So what do you think the biggest threat is to faith in general? Like our generation, that generation that's hiding in plain sight?
Yeah. The greatest threat to a believing generation?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's hiding in plain sight.
Okay,
Things that
yeah.
we interact with on a daily basis that we may not think could even like cause us to slip or stumble or fall. Like, what do you think about
That's
that?
good. Okay, ready for this? Entitlement that leads to anger, I think man, I see this so many times. I see this in my heart, so let me admit it to it first. How right under the surface of so many believers is this, they're so close to boiling over. And I think, sadly, it's a trickle down from Washington, D.C., it's a trickle down from the media, and it's a trickle down from the climate in our nation. And I would be hopeful that Christians would be the exact opposite. And I think a slow boil under the surface, seething anger has seeped into the church. And it only comes out when we think we deserve, that's what I'm saying, entitlement. When we think we deserve something and we don't get it. Like, I've been embarrassed in my own heart. Like, when I think I deserve something and I don't get it, my first reaction is not humility or brokenness. It's, I need to be important. So I think that's, it's hiding in plain sight. Some of y'all probably been part of churches where you've been at a business meeting, and all of a sudden it goes from spirit-filled to like, what just happened? Like, what just got vomited, in those words. And so that to me is sad, that I feel like hiding in plain sight from this generation to my generation, the generation above us, is that under the surface seething. When we think we're entitled to something, we don't get it. Our first response is not spirit-led, it's very flesh-led. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. What have you seen works in the church that helps kind of integrate like people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultures, Because there are, I mean, I really love the fact, right now personally at Promise, I feel like it's a very Bible teaching church.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's so many newcomers coming in from those backgrounds, right? And they haven't, the churches they might have been going to before may not have been a Bible teaching church. So it's a good place for them to grow spiritually. But the reality is, it's very difficult to, I guess, become part of the church body because there's cultural barriers, there's socioeconomic barriers. So what works? What have you seen work? I don't think there's a quick solution, but what works?
I was glad you said that, because I was about to say there's not going to be a quick solution to that, because culture, people who study culture say it takes 7 years for the culture to change. So when you look at colors, in like fashionable colors or music, style music, it stays for 7 years and then it changes over. So if you haven't done anything in your house in 40 years, you have mauve, right? Because that was really cool 40 years ago, was mauve. And if you stick around long enough, it may, yes, y'all remember mauve? If you stick on long enough, it may come back around again. So every 7 years, all that to say, like, it takes 7 years for a cultural change. So I would say, like, in a church, to be patient with that, but also to be intentional to start working toward that 7-year change. James probably gives some pretty good insight when you're talking about different socioeconomic groups. I mean, certainly on the favoritism part that James talks about, but I'm even thinking like the practical, being really slow to speak, but really quick to listen, slow to anger, go back to what we were talking about earlier. But Highland's really weird. We're in the middle of a neighborhood, and it's the average household, and did you say that about Highland? Like, no one in Waco ever.
You have to want to come to Highland.
You don't trip over
understand
Highland.
that.
Like, it's in the middle of a weird, in a neighborhood. So right, church specialists say, or strategists say, build on a major thoroughfare and be on a highway and be seen. And this, right, Cheesy's like you would never know Highland was there. You have to want to get there. But we're in the middle of a neighborhood that the average household income is $28,000 household. 70% Hispanic, and 40% are underinsured or uninsured. And so, so we started about 10 years ago trying to make some changes. And some of them sound so funny when I say it, but this is what I preach in on Sundays is blue jeans, usually a t-shirt, right? I mean, David looks nicer right now than I do on Sunday mornings. Normally, he has blue jeans. Like and I still have some senior adults that can't stand that I wear blue jeans and t-shirts. But what that was, it was a disarming, purposeful thing to do, so that those who lived in our neighborhood, who were at $28,000 household income, could come to church and go and not feel like they were underdressed or didn't have the right clothes to be there. So some of those small little, types of things, of course that would be, church leadership kind of agreeing to what that looks like. About every 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we sing a song in Spanish. We have a live Spanish translator every Sunday morning, so it's kind of crazy. I have to send her my notes on Friday. She reads through them, and so we have earpieces, and so she's up in the little crow's nest. I don't know how she does it. My brain doesn't work like this. She hears me in English and is translating in real time and hearing everything I'm saying, and then it goes to a little app on people's phones so they can hear it in Spanish. But little things like that for our situation, right? I don't think Providence is in the middle of a strong Spanish speaking neighborhood or a $28,000. So every church can be different on that. But I will say that I feel like James does a really good job giving some really practical things. So I think listening is huge. We made the mistake of 10 years ago of having a food pantry in our church. We did. If y'all have it, that's awesome. And the neighbor, when we started going to the neighborhood, people, they're like, we're not going to come to you. You're white people who put pumpkin pie filling cans out for us, and we have no idea what to do with pumpkin pie filling. And so we assumed that, or lima beans, right? That's what everybody brings to the canned food drives. Because no one our Spanish speaking friends hate lima beans as much as English speaking people hate lima beans. So once we asked them, what is that called? It's called like a felt need or versus, like we assumed our neighborhood, because it was poor, wanted canned food. And they told us, when we finally went to them and asked, which was being quick to listen, they didn't want food, they wanted medical care. So we opened up, we have 2 nights a week now, the Wellness Center, where we have doctors and nurses who volunteer, and they're required to pay $5. So there's some dignity to it. And they come in vanfuls sometimes. I mean, literally, Grandma Rosita drives around the neighborhood and picks up all of the cousins and the uncles and aunts, and there'll be a van load of 15 people, unload because they know they can pay $5 and get health care, health and health assessment. We don't do surgeries there. We've yet to do an amputation. We don't do any surgeries there. But it's just this medical. So once the neighborhood told us, we don't want your canned food, we're scared, many of us being here illegally, to go to a hospital. We're afraid that they're going to send us back to El Salvador or Honduras. That's kind of our neighborhood. But we have sick kids, and we need medical care. So that was a really helpful thing, is meeting people where they actually are, instead of where a upper middle income white guy thought here's what y'all need. Y'all need canned food. Like, man, we don't eat your food, but we need medical care. Yeah, that's a great question.
Dan, or any of you guys sitting in there, my faves over here, do you have a question for JD, for Dan, their fearless leader? Because I want to honor your time.
No,
We'll
I'm doing
take
good. I want to honor
maybe
y'all's
2
time.
more questions.
Yes, ma'am.
One maybe from this section where Dan is, and maybe one more, and then we'll wrap up.
So under the age of 23 gets to ask a question.
Yeah, we might have a question. If you don't, that's fine, but I thought I'd open it to y'all.
I'm sitting over here.
Okay. You're young at heart.
I know I am.
You're
Well,
connected.
but I don't want to okay. And I heard you talk a lot about Gen Z, and then I think what I'm thinking is more millennial, but Gen Z and millennial.
Sure.
I feel like in our experience, we love to have folks come into our home. We do that a lot. That's like a thing for us, and it has been for probably 10, I don't even know how long. And there was even a time where we had, because we couldn't get people to go to church, but we could get them to our home, and so that was a strategy for a while. But I find that they're just, it's sometimes so much easier to deal with folks that were the unchurched kids. It's our kids. Like, what do we do about the ones that we screwed up, evidently? I mean, what about the millennials and the Gen Zs who were raised in a Christian home and are so turned off,
Right.
and are wounded by God's people? They have legitimate reasons. They, what do we do?
Sure.
I want you to
I'll give a few answers,
Yeah.
but I would love to hear the answers of the people to your right who are kind of, I know that they're not necessarily millennial.
Right, yeah.
But definitely kind of right there. I mean, I think one of the most tenderizing things a non-Gen Zer can say to a Gen Zer or a younger millennial is, I'm sorry that. I think that we had this conversation with my daughter a couple years ago, apologizing to her that I did not apologize to her enough when she was growing up. If I came late to her soccer game or her swim meet, I just kind of rush in, watch, and then, we just go home. And so, and I wish I remember who said that it's the most unapologized to generation, because they kind of learn from us that we don't make mistakes and we haven't done anything wrong. So I think that tenderizes the heart of someone who has been hurt by the church, or feels like it's a waste of time, whatever. is to apologize for some, you know, not that you have to make something up, but it's a legitimate apology. I'm sorry we didn't pray enough together as a family. I'm sorry that there were many times that you needed me there and I was not there. I'm sorry that I didn't see some of the hurts that you were going through. And when it's a legitimate, heartfelt, go back to our authentic word, apology, I've seen some pretty sweet things happen in some families. I'll make a quick observation about the two of y'all that I've noticed this whole time. Y'all, when I was a college student, I would have loved to be at y'all's house. Y'all look at each other so often. It's the sweetest thing. I don't know if you noticed this about yourself. Like when you talk, your husband just stares. And when you were talking, just you glance to him 2 or 3 times. So like that kind of relationship, I think that's the relationship that that Gen Z loves to be around. Like a husband and wife that love each other. Think about how many, I get teary-eyed thinking about it, how many Gen Zers never saw mom and dad look lovingly toward each other or talk lovingly toward one another. And I mean, y'all are like a little newlywed couple over here. Like y'all look at each other, you nod, you smile. So I've watched y'all tonight. I've done that several times. So that's a sweet thing. So I keep inviting people in. Yeah, here's my last story that I do want to ask. Ask Gen Z that for sure. So, did you just put our arm around her just When I was a youth minister down in Houston, I remember calling an 8th grade guy, I think it was Peter, and his mom, it was his Sunday school teacher had said, man, he's just having a tough time in life. So I called him and said, Peter, this is John. You doing all right? Yep. I can't pray for anything? No. School okay? Yeah. Things at home going well? Yeah. You gonna be at church Sunday? Yeah. I mean, I ran out of things to say. And I go, all right, well, man, thanks for picking up the phone. It was good talking to you. You know, if you ever want to call me, here's my number. All right. Have fun. His mom, Diane, on Sunday said, that phone call to Peter, he went on and on. To him, and how special that was. I was like, I don't even think he said a word. He just grunted on the phone. And I remember that story because sometimes it feels like you're not getting much out of the ones in whom you are investing. Sometimes you just get the grunts or the, hey, thanks for letting us come over for food. But there's something really deep happening inside of the one who's being invested into. And so I think that's the other thing I was going to say is don't give up or don't grow weary in doing good because you do reap a harvest. And I love how Paul said that, but only if you do not give up. And so I think for those that feel hurt by the church, hurt by life, hurt by mom and dad, feel left out, feel like they weren't apologized to, it's never too late to give an apology. And even if they don't respond with big hugs and tears and a big sweet Hallmark ending, there's something deep inside of a person. If you invest in them and care for them, some of that ice starts to break that's around their heart. Gen Z. I mean, you can trash everything I just got through saying. But what are some things that you feel like your generation needs from the non-Gen Zers? And if you were rebelling against the Lord, like what would you want from a 40-year-old, 60-year-old? In between.
Well, I'll say none of us are here because you're here, JD, but it's because Fran invited us. I'm just keeping it real, but like, none of us heard say, oh, JD Wake is coming. It's like, oh, Fran invited us over. I know that's why every single one of those guys are over there. It's because, of course, we love coming to Fran's house. Sorry, Craig, but it's Fran's house.
Craig just pays for it.
I think like what you said is like just inviting them over, inviting them to your home. I talked to so many guys who just said that like I wish I had some older guys that like, because I have a lot of mentors in my life, so I wish I had guys that just take me out to lunch or guys that would just invite me over. And so just open up the door. If you don't have a door, open up and take me a coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hospitality is a underappreciated word. And we think too little of it, of the fact that just inviting someone out to do something goes a super long way. Anybody else?
Maybe one more?
I think for me, the biggest thing I've seen is like just what you've been talking about, just seeing Christ-likeness lived out. So many people that have left the church and that I've observed kind of depart from their faith didn't see what it meant to walk with Christ and someone that they're mentored. Either their parents failed to, like you were talking about, or someone in their church got caught up in themselves. But like people that I've seen come to know the Lord who are my age, they didn't see it. It wasn't because someone gave a great sermon. It wasn't because the gospel presentation was phenomenal. And oftentimes it's not even like, yes, you present the gospel to them, but that's not the main reason that they are opened up to it. It's because you lived life with them. You lived out what it meant to be Christ-like and what it meant to genuinely care for them at their needs. And just learning about them. I think that's a huge thing. Just as like whenever you go to present the gospel or whenever you go to create that relationship, you want, like just as much as you want them to come to the Lord, you should seek to learn about them. And it opens them up.
That's incarnational ministry, right? Like you're walking with them. My generation and above, our salvation was event driven. Billy Graham, revivals, crusades, promise keepers, big events. This generation their salvation is process. Like it's journey. And so where a lot of us got saved at an altar, a lot of Gen Z gets saved at coffee houses and like kind of outside of the what we would say the historic place for the gospel to be declared. It's I think it's almost more effective in coffee houses sometimes because the facade's gone. There's no "Just As I Am" playing in the background. It's just man, straight on life on life. So that's a good word. That's awesome.
Well, you can certainly stay forever, I think, at Christmas